And then there were none. Agatha Christie story summary mystery and crime. The sky was covered in gray clouds as the 10 strangers set off in different directions, all heading toward the same destination, Soldier Island. For each of them, a mysterious invitation, written in words calculated to touch old wounds or secret desires. None of them knew each other, at least not directly, but something united them, a past they wished to hide, and which now called them to a final season of judgment. The crossing through the rough seas was already a sign that this would not be an ordinary weekend. The boat was rocking violently, as if the ocean wanted to throw them out before they could even disembark. The boatman, a quiet man, did not exchange unnecessary words. He simply looked at each passenger with deep eyes, as if he recognized invisible sins. Upon arriving on the island, they were greeted by Thomas and Ethel Rogers, the housekeepers. The Victorian mansion on the cliff top was both beautiful and oppressive. It seemed to watch its visitors with stony eyes, impervious to time, accustomed to silence and secrecy. The interiors were cold, meticulously arranged, as if awaiting a ritual. In the main hall, each guest found his or her name marked in discreet letters above the bedroom doors. Each space seemed to have been assembled with attention to the smallest detail: clothes pressed, beds made, towels folded, subtle scents in the air. And on each nightstand, a copy of a children's poem. 10 little soldiers went to dinner, one of them choked, and so there were 9 left. That simple, almost naive rhyme caused discomfort. Why was it there? And why had each of them found it in the same place? The poem, with its sinister verses, narrated the fall of toy soldiers one by one, a countdown in verse form. That evening, during dinner, tensions first arose. General MacArthur, an old man hardened by time and war, watched everyone with tired eyes. Vera Claythorne, young and polite, tried to hide her uneasiness with polite smiles. Judge Wargrave, serious and impassive, maintained his silence with the same firmness with which he had held his gavel in court. Emily Brent prayed silently, while the physician, Dr. Armstrong, tried to hide the trembling of his hands with sips of wine. Anthony Marston, arrogant and handsome, toasted himself without caring about the judgmental looks. Dinner ended in tense silence. And then a mechanical voice filled the room, coming from a hidden gramophone. The recording accused each of them of a crime. Crimes that were never tried, never punished by the official justice system. But there, on that isolated island, far from the eyes of the world, justice took on a different form. A dark, theatrical, implacable form. The accusations varied in severity, but they all had one thing in common: death. Negligence, omission, revenge. Each of those guests was, in some way, responsible for taking a life. The words echoed through the house like final sentences. Some denied it, some trembled, some screamed. But they all knew, deep down, that they were there for a reason. That same night, Anthony Marston took a sip of his drink, suddenly choked and fell dead. The shock was immediate. A doctor among them confirmed, he was dead. In the center of the table, 10 small porcelain figures, the toy soldiers, were lined up. After Anthony's death, one of them had disappeared. 9 little soldiers' terror settled silently in that glass-enclosed room. Anthony Marston's body still lay there, motionless, his eyes open as if still defying fate. The silence after the shock was broken only by the sound of the wind hitting the windows. Vera put her hands to her mouth in horror. Dr. Armstrong stepped forward, knelt down, and performed the quick examinations that medical instinct still allowed. But there was no doubt, Anthony was dead. Poisoned. Quickly, cyanide, Armstrong murmured. A fast-acting poison. Everyone looked at each other. The accusations from the recording were still hammering at their minds, but now the threat was real. The dinner, the wine, the invitations, it was all part of a precisely planned plan. A plan for revenge. Judge Wargrave was the first to speak lucidly. Someone among us is judging us. And he is willing to carry out the sentence. The room was cleared. Marston's body was carried into one of the bedrooms. The atmosphere became denser, heavier than ever. Thomas Rogers, with trembling hands, tried to pick up the glasses, but almost dropped the tray. Ethel, pale, looked ready to faint. Fear was beginning to spread, creeping, suffocating. The next morning, a scream rent the air. Ethel Rogers had been found dead, still in her nightgown, in her bed. Armstrong, once again, confirmed it, an overdose of sleeping pills. Accident? Suicide? Or the invisible hand of the same executioner? Another little soldier disappeared from the dining room tray. The number was now 8. Suspicion grew. Fear turned into contained hysteria. The entire group began to watch each other. No one trusted anyone. They went to the top of the cliff to look for a sign of rescue, but there were no boats. The island was completely isolated. No telephone lines. No working radios. Just the sound of the sea and the wind. The next few days were a downward spiral. General MacArthur began to act strangely, secluding himself on the edge of the cliff, staring at the horizon as if waiting for something that would never come. He spoke in a low voice, as if confessing sins to the sea itself. They always come back, he murmured. The dead come back. The next afternoon, he did not return from his walk. Vera and Lombard found him lying among the rocks, with a fatal blow to the head. The old soldier, with his war secrets, had been silenced. 7 little soldiers on a tray. The pattern was clear. Each death followed the lines of the poem. And each death felt like a carefully executed punishment. Everyone was on trial, and they were losing. That night, panic set in. Emily Brent refused to sleep. She spoke of divine punishment and trials. She recited psalms and chanted with wide eyes. Armstrong tried to convince her to take a sedative. She refused. She said she accepted God's will, not man's. The next morning, she was found dead, an injection in her neck, and sting marks on the window. An eerie reference to the line from the nursery rhyme. Someone there was staging each death as part of a deadly spectacle. 6 Porcelain soldiers, the meticulously chained deaths fueled paranoia. The group tried to find traces of the killer. They ransacked rooms, hid knives, locked doors. But the threat was among them. Perhaps more than one. The island became a theater of distrust. One sultry morning, Justice Wargrave seemed particularly silent. He had a long discussion with Lombard, with Vera, with Bloor, the ex-policeman. Then he disappeared. They found him sitting in an armchair in the living room, with a white wool judge's wig on his head and a bullet wound in the center of his forehead. It seemed like a spectacle. A grotesque staging of a final judgment. 5 soldiers, the psychological toll was unbearable. Vera cried constantly. Armstrong sweated and trembled. Lombard, who was trying to maintain control, was already doubting his own sanity. Bloor, wide-eyed, began to prowl the house with a gun in his hands, pointing it at shadows, suspicious of everyone. Armstrong disappeared the next night. No one saw him, no one heard him. By dawn, there were only 4 left. They searched every inch of the island, screaming for him. Nothing. No sign. Just the wind and the absence. 4 soldiers, the waves crashed against the rocks like war drums, relentless, indifferent to the despair that consumed the survivors of Soldier Island. Now only Vera, Lombard, and Bloor remained. Armstrong's absence was a ghost hanging in the air. No sound, no trace. Only disappearance and fear. 3 little soldiers. Vera's mind was beginning to crumble. Her past came back in dark waves. The child's death, the water, the screams. She trembled, murmuring the verses of the poem as if they dictated her fate. Lombard tried to maintain control of the situation, but it was clear, terror had won. The next morning, Bloor's body was found, his head crushed by a statue that had fallen from the second-floor balcony. Just as the poem says, one of them was crushed, and there were 2. 2 soldiers. The air grew thick as lead. Vera and Lombard stared at each other, eyes wide, silence roaring between them. No words. Just the certainty that one of them was the killer. Or that there was something, or someone, else on the island. Tensions gripped them, their every move was watched. Every step became suspicious. Vera, breathless, persuaded Lombard to help her search for Armstrong. Maybe he was still alive. Maybe he was hiding, plotting. They walked down the path to the edge of the island, where the rocks formed small caves that were wet with the tide. The body was there. Dr. Armstrong, lying among the rocks, his face purple, drowned. Vera screamed. The sound echoed like a funeral bell. She looked at Lombard. He was armed. She remembered what he had said the night before. If there's going to be one left, it's going to be me. Instinct spoke louder. In a quick gesture, he snatched the gun from his hands and fired. Lombard's body fell backwards, sinking into the sand. The shot echoed across the beach. A bird took flight in the distance. The last toy soldier broke on the tray in the living room, but it wasn't over yet. Vera staggered up to the house. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. She was alone. She had survived, or so I imagined. The house seemed different now. Too quiet. Too cold. The furniture was in place, but it seemed arranged as if it were on a stage set. Every room was a reminder of the horror. Every wall a tomb of memories. She found a noose hanging in the room. A hanging. Just like the last verse, he hanged himself, and there was none left. Vera walked in a trance towards the noose. The room seemed to shrink. The words repeated themselves in her mind. No one will believe me. I killed. I killed. The weight of guilt, the terror of loneliness, the psychological pressure, it all culminated there, in a single moment. She placed the rope around her neck, and he jumped. Silence returned to the island, but the story didn't end there. Days later, a boat arrived. Police, investigators and journalists set foot on the cursed ground. They found the bodies, the house intact, the broken toy soldiers. And an impossible mystery: how could the last murder have occurred? Who was the real perpetrator? Inside a bottle, thrown into the sea, a letter, carefully written. Cold. Rational. Signed by Justice Lawrence Wargrave. He confessed everything. He detailed how he had meticulously orchestrated each murder, from the invitation to the execution. He had singled out people who were guilty of crimes that justice had never reached. Crimes that had gone unpunished. Justice denied that. As a judge, he handed down sentences that he faked his own death with the help of Armstrong, who believed it was a simulation to catch the killer. Then he killed the doctor. Coldly. Without remorse. Until the last act, the most theatrical, convincing Vera to hang herself. Leaving the perfect setting for an unsolvable crime, the sick mind of a man who wanted to be God. But now, there are none left. I and the bottle. The letter floated for days until it reached the shore. A fisherman found it, strangely sealed and protected. The police, upon opening it, discovered a horrifying will carefully written by a man of cold and obsessive intelligence, Judge Lawrence Wargrave. The letter began with a polite introduction. My name is Wargrave. I have been a judge for over 30 years. I have always believed in justice. But human justice fails, often. The text was not a confession made out of remorse. It was the meticulous pride of a man who believed himself to be the executor of a higher judgment. He handpicked his victims, people who had committed murder but had never been punished by law. I decided that the world needed a new order, a perfect execution. Not out of anger, but out of balance. If God does not punish, someone must punish. Wargrave described how he sent out the letters with fake invitations, using different pretexts: a job, a meeting, a getaway. The island was the stage. The children's poem, the script. Each death, an act. Coldly, he narrated the crimes. Anthony Marston, poisoned with cyanide. He killed 2 children at high speed and showed no remorse. His arrogance was his sentence. Mrs. Rogers, dead from a sleeping pill overdose. Guilt destroyed her sanity. I only accelerated the process. General MacArthur, assassinated by a blow to the head. I expected death. I only gave it shape. Mr. Rogers, killed with an axe. Neat, clean, just like he was. Miss Emily Brent, injected with cyanide. Too religious to admit guilt. Her judgment was silent, like a divine whisper. Dr. Armstrong, manipulated as a pawn. A brilliant man, but foolish in his vanity. Blore, crushed by a statue. Irony is a perfect seasoning for justice. Lombard, shot by Vera. I created the moment. I gave her the role. And she executed it perfectly. Vera, driven to despair. I didn't touch her. I just left the scene. And she hanged herself. Wargrave described coldly how he faked his own death. He used makeup, fake blood, and enlisted Armstrong's help, promising to solve the mystery together. In doing so, he diverted suspicion from himself. Then, when Armstrong was alone, he pushed him overboard onto the rocks. I wanted to create a perfect enigma. An unsolvable crime. Where each culprit received the fate they had escaped for years. The most disturbing part was the obvious pleasure with which Wargrave described it all. Like an artist admiring his work. A playwright satisfied with the end of the play. I had an incurable disease. I knew I would die soon. I preferred to leave life not as a dying man, but as an architect of justice. When it was all over, I attached the gun with an elastic cord. I shot myself. I closed the cycle. The end of the letter was icy. Without remorse. Without emotion, justice has been served. Now, yes, there are none left. The repercussion was immense. The tabloid press ran headlines with photos of the cursed island, the 10 guests, and the mysterious deaths. The letter became a subject of study among criminologists. Some considered Wargrave a narcissistic maniac. Others, a twisted genius. Psychologists have analyzed his mind. A man with an extreme sense of morality, who turned justice into revenge. Who turned the trial into a spectacle. And who, in the end, chose to die theatrically. In the center of his own tragedy, Soldier Island was closed off. It became a symbol of paranoia, guilt and punishment. A place where social masks were forcibly torn off. Where no one was innocent. Society, confronted with the brutality of the crimes and the genius of their execution, was divided. Some called him the last judge. Others called him the devil in a robe. But one thing was certain, that on that island, no one escaped, not even the guilt, nor of justice, not even death.